The summer of 1787 was scorching, and Philadelphia's State House felt more like a furnace than a meeting place for the nation's most brilliant minds. The air was thick with humidity, the windows shut tight to protect the men inside from prying eyes, and the constant scratching of quills on parchment echoed throughout the room. These men, known as the Founding Fathers, were struggling with a monumental task, creating a new government for a fledgling nation that had just thrown off the chains of British rule. But here's the twist. One of the smallest states in the fledgling Union, New Jersey, was about to play a role that would dramatically reshape the very foundation of this country. It wasn't just the big players like Virginia or Pennsylvania that would have a say in the future of the U.S. Constitution. No, New Jersey had an outsized influence that would forever alter the course of American history. In those tense days at the Constitutional Convention, as arguments flared over representation in the new government, New Jersey, led by a determined delegate, stood firm against what it saw as the unfair advantage given to larger states. But what happened next would be the beginning of a compromise, one that would ultimately change the landscape of U.S. politics forever. Let's rewind for a moment. Picture it, the fledgling United States, just a decade after declaring its independence. The Articles of Confederation, the very framework that held the country together, had proved to be woefully inadequate. The central government was too weak to manage the economy, maintain order, or secure the nation's borders. In short, the Articles were failing, and something new had to be done. In the summer of 1787, the Continental Congress called for a constitutional convention. Delegates from the states would gather to address the flaws in the Articles and create a new system of government. The stakes were high, too high, to leave the outcome to chance. As the delegates filed into the hot, stuffy room, there was one issue on everyone's mind: representation. How would the new government be structured? Should it favor large states with large populations, or small states that feared losing their voice? The larger states, including Virginia and Pennsylvania, argued for a system where representation in the new legislature would be based on population size. After all, the more people a state had, the more power it should wield, they reasoned. But the smaller states, like New Jersey, were not having it. New Jersey, which had only a fraction of the population compared to Virginia, feared that the bigger states would steamroll them. And so the Garden States delegation, led by Delegate William Paterson, drew a line in the sand. They proposed a new plan, the New Jersey Plan, that would give every state, regardless of size, an equal vote in Congress. It was a bold move, and it wasn't the popular choice. But it was rooted in one essential belief, that every state, big or small, should have an equal say in the new government. Paterson and his fellow delegates were determined to ensure that New Jersey and the smaller states would not be overpowered by the larger, more populous states. What followed was a dramatic battle over the future of the nation. The larger states, led by James Madison of Virginia, were steadfast in their belief that representation should be based on population size. Tensions ran high. What would become of the small states? Would they be crushed under the weight of the larger ones? But then came the breakthrough, a moment that changed everything. After days of impasse, the delegates found a way to meet in the middle. In what's now called the Great Compromise, the new Constitution would create a bicameral legislature. The House of Representatives would be based on population, giving the larger states more power. But the Senate, here was the key, would give every state 2 senators regardless of size. This ensured that smaller states, like New Jersey, had an equal voice in the legislative process. And just like that, New Jersey's influence in shaping the Constitution was solidified. The state may not have been the largest or most powerful, but its unwavering defense of equal representation created a balance that allowed every state, regardless of size, to have a voice in the new government. The Great Compromise was a triumph of negotiation, but it wasn't the only moment that New Jersey's influence would be felt. Another crucial contribution came in the form of New Jersey's ratification of the Constitution. While some states hesitated, New Jersey quickly signed on, becoming the third state to approve the new document. New Jersey's swift ratification sent a message to the rest of the country. The new Constitution had enough support to succeed. This vote was a vital signal that the new government was gaining momentum, and it helped convince other states to follow suit. But New Jersey's role didn't stop there. It wasn't just in the halls of Philadelphia that the state had made its mark. The influence of its political leaders would continue to be felt long after the signing of the Constitution. For example, Jonathan Dayton, a New Jersey delegate at the Constitutional Convention, became the youngest person to sign the document at just 26 years old. His commitment to the cause would propel him into a political career, and he would go on to serve as a congressman and Speaker of the House. And then there was the role of New Jersey in the Bill of Rights. In the aftermath of the Constitution's ratification, a debate erupted over the need for a Bill of Rights to protect individual freedoms. While some believed the Constitution was sufficient, others, particularly Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, argued that specific protections were needed. The push for a Bill of Rights would ultimately lead to the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, which guarantee freedoms like speech, religion, and the press. But New Jersey was instrumental in pushing for these rights. In 1789, a resolution to amend the Constitution was introduced in the House of Representatives, and it was none other than New Jersey's own Congressman, Elias Boudinot, who championed the cause. Boudinot, a strong advocate for individual rights, played a crucial role in securing the amendments that would protect the freedoms Americans hold dear. So, New Jersey's contributions to the Constitution were not just about small state representation. They were about the values of fairness, equality, and liberty that would become the bedrock of the United States. The Garden State may have been small in size, but its impact on the nation's founding was anything but small. When we think of the Constitution, we often focus on the big names, the George Washingtons, the Thomas Jeffersons, the James Madisons. But New Jersey's story reminds us that every state, no matter how small, had a hand in creating the United States. The Great Compromise, the Bill of Rights, the ratification, these moments were all shaped in part by the determination and vision of New Jersey. The next time you walk through the streets of Trenton or stand beneath the state's iconic cherry blossoms, remember, New Jersey didn't just witness the birth of the Constitution, it helped give it life. The Constitution we know today, the framework that has guided the nation for over 2 centuries, would look very different if not for the voices of New Jersey's delegates and its citizens. In the end, it was New Jersey's steadfast commitment to equality, fairness, and representation that ensured every voice, no matter how small, would be heard in the formation of the United States. The small state had helped shape the grand idea of democracy and, in doing so, had secured its place in history.